Welcome to Art Bell Somewhere in Time. Tonight featuring Coast to Coast AM from May 19th, 1998.
From the high desert and the great American Southwest, I bid you all good evening or good morning, as the case may be, across this great land, and welcome into another live edition of Coast to Coast AM from the Tahitian and Hawaiian Island chains in the west, eastward to the Caribbean and the U.S. Virgin Islands, south into South America, north all the way to the pole, and worldwide on the internet. And tonight also including new affiliates, WNBF in Binghamton, New York, 1290 AM. Glad to have you on board. Welcome to the madness. And WMFR AM in Greensboro, North Carolina, 1230 on the dial there. Also, welcome to the weirdness, the madness, whatever it is we do here, and we do many things. And I have got so much breaking news for you tonight that I don't know how we're going to fit it all in. In a moment, Whitley Strieber and Jaime Maussan, who is was the 60 Minutes reporter for Mexico. And while you think you might know what's going on in Mexico with regard to the fires, you don't. You're not being told the true story, but I'm going to tell it to you here shortly. Then Daryl Sims, Dr. Roger Lear, and General A coming up in the next hour, a general class officer, who will speak with anonymity. I've got additional breaking news that I'll try and get to you as I can, but we've got to get to Whitley and to Jaime in this hour, so in a moment we will proceed. Well, all right, here is an AP story talking about the fires, finally, as the U.S. begins to catch up on the news. U.S. firefighters, experts, were at work in southern Mexico on Monday trying to determine the best way to end a rash of wildfires, spewing a dense haze across Mexico and into Texas. It's not the half of it. The 7-member team and Mexican officials are deciding on how to coordinate efforts, select which fires to fight first, and determine what resources are needed. That all comes from a U.S. Embassy official, in quotes, on customary conditions of anonymity. Weird. Anyway, here is Whitley Strieber. Whit, welcome to the show.
Hi, Art. I'm glad to be on the show. I'm talking to you from Phoenix tonight. I'm on my confirmation author tour. So,
well, how's it going?
Well, it's going really well. It's so gratifying. This is the first book that has hard evidence in it about this subject. I mean, real hard evidence. And there's a tremendous response. I'm going to, even from the mainstream media, there's going to be a Rosie O'Donnell. I've already taped it on July the 20th. It is going to amaze the country. What happens when what she says on that show is going to really change some people's minds about this whole subject. So, and there's lots of people coming to the bookstores. The media is very supportive. It's been an extraordinary author tour and very different from what I'm used to.
Well, I'm glad that it's going well, and you and I are going to have to do more of a program on that topic, and we shall. We have with us Jaime Maussan. You sent me an extremely disturbing facts about what's going on in Mexico. Now, I've been getting reports from all over the southern part of the U.S., stretching out all the way to the Caribbean.
The smoke in the U.S. right now stretches, as of today, from Albuquerque, New Mexico to Miami, Florida, in the United States.
My God.
It is well out into the Caribbean as well. It is down into South America. The smoke mass is probably the largest in recorded history. It's larger than the ones that covered the South China Sea and went from Indonesia into Southeast Asia late last year. The reason for it is interesting and disturbing. There is not enough atmospheric circulation going on. 15 years ago, or 12 years ago, I wrote a book with James Konetka called Nature's End that was set in the year 2050. And among the many things that it was right about, startlingly so, were these fires that keep breaking out in excessively dry tropical areas, and also about the fact that the atmospheric circulation is dropping at the same time, so the smoke, instead of dissipating, just hangs and spreads and gets larger and larger. But this, as you know from that fax I sent you after talking to Jaime, it goes beyond that. There's much more happening than wildfires that were set by farmers. There are matters of concerns about volcanism in Mexico right now that we need to talk about.
Volcanism?
Volcanoes.
Now, that's very different than simple wildfires.
Yes, it is.
All right, fine. Also, I want to add one thing, and that is that all of this is exceptionally underreported. I mean, the national press, Whitley, I was doing it 2 or 3 days just from faxes from listeners before the national press even caught on to all of this smoke. What is the matter with our press?
Well, I just, Art, I don't know. It's like they're kind of in a state of denial. I mean, they'd rather spend more time, if that's possible, on Monica Lewinsky than on what is one of the greatest environmental catastrophes. I just finished getting off the line to some people in Houston, and they said that it is people in Houston and I guess also in San Antonio are having tremendous respiratory problems. People are getting swollen glands in their necks as a result of this, of the respiratory, of the irritation involved. This is a serious crisis.
It's a big story, and for days they didn't touch it, and even now they have barely begun to catch on. Let us go to Mexico, where Jaime Maussan is. Now, we've got a little delay, so we're going to have to be careful not to walk on top of each other. Jaime Maussan, of course, the one-time anchor of the Mexican version of 60 Minutes, and a journalist. Jaime, welcome to the program.
Hello, Art. How are you?
I'm fine, and Whitley is here as well. Yes. Whitley, why don't you go ahead and ask him what you would like to.
Okay, Jaime, what I would like you to do first is to, before we get into the issue of the volcanoes and what's happening with the volcanoes, describe for us conditions, for example, as you're living with them right now in Mexico City because of the smoke.
Oh, well, this is considered the worst crisis ever in Mexico. This is going to be remembered someday as what happened in London in 1954, in Los Angeles in 1972, when we had so much particles suspended on the air that many people are now getting sick, and we have a few reports from people who are dying because they had previous respiratory problems. When we talk about the contamination, pollution, when we talk about ozone or other contaminants, is nothing compared to particles suspended on the air, because these particles go directly into our lungs and then sooner or later are going to create very heavy respiratory problems. All the schools now are putting their students inside the classrooms. They don't have any activity outside. You can see Mexico City after 5 o'clock almost empty because people are really afraid of what is happening. This is very, very serious. Probably is the most important catastrophe of the century, not just for Mexico, but probably even for some states in the U.S., in Central America. And this is very disturbing because we heard today that the experts are telling us that the El Niño is going to continue all this year. Then some of the conditions are going to persist. I don't mean the drought. I think we will have very heavy rains after June. But again, this condition can be repeated next year. They don't know now if this El Niño can be with us for some other years. I mean, this could be just the beginning of a real global change, a weather change.
Jaime, if I may ask you a question, are you located in Mexico City now?
Yes, I am located in Mexico City. I live up in the mountains the conditions close to my house are not so bad as is now in the city and in the states that are south of Mexico. Those places are really under the worst of this crisis. Mexico City also, again, is suffering because we normally, May every year, we have a very contaminated month because of, let's say, natural conditions in here. All the traffic, the industry, and the climatic inversions. Because of that, it's normal that we have bad contamination, bad pollution month. But this year, it's even worse. I mean, this has to be looked very carefully, because if this is just the beginning, you can imagine what is going to happen in some other years. We have fires all over Mexico, especially in all the tropical areas, all the forest areas, and the worst is that many of these fires are underground. I mean, if you have a fire, this fire can be there for so long, I mean, because you cannot control it underground, and then come back again. And this is happening again everywhere. Now in the Chimalapas. Chimalapas is the most important jungle in all North America. This jungle should be safe, and we have 14 fires today.
Okay, Jaime, if I might interrupt you for a moment, could you explain to us how you can have a fire underground, please?
Yes, this fire goes into the roots, or into the trees, and can stay there for a month. If you don't have any rain, if you have soil that is very rich in other nutrients, with forest, with little grass, can stay there underground. We have an accident with an American 3 or 4 days ago here in the park where I live. I live in the Desierto de los Leones, which was declared the first national park in Mexico back in 1917. This man was running where we had a fire probably 1 month ago, a month and a half ago. And he slipped and he got into a hole and he was completely burned in his both legs, just because we didn't know there was a fire there. Then we had another new fire last night in the park, exactly where this man had the accident, because the fire was underground. And you cannot see smoke there, you cannot see a thing, and the fire is still there. And Mexico, I mean, this area is not the only one. We have an area, for example, in the state of Mexico with 3 hectares, I think it's 6 acres, where you have more than 350 centigrades. I don't know how much is it in Fahrenheit.
You mean this is coming up from below?
Very high temperature.
Jaime, this is coming up from below. It's not a fire that started on the surface. Is this
well, it started in the surface before, but then the fire was controlled, let's say, put down with water and everything, but then the fire stays there, and you cannot see it. It's underground. We didn't know about this phenomenon. This is the first year we have this phenomenon in Mexico, and it's because it's so dry. All the water you have in the States and many other countries are having in South America is not in Mexico and is not in Central America. This has to be called as an emergency, international emergency situation. This is serious, and it's not going to persist very long, because we will have the rainy season beginning in a month from now. And we are expecting, because the Niño is still with us, we are expecting a very heavy rainy season. Then,
well, let's hope it's really very heavy.
Yeah.
Because I think the United States sending 7 people down there is probably not enough.
No.
I mean, because that's...
I don't think it's enough.
That's one person for every 2,000 fires, it looks like.
All right, let me get in here for just one moment. Jaime, we hear about, first of all, our press, our American press, has almost not touched this story. They are just beginning to tell it a little bit. Some of our Weather Channel is telling a little bit about it, but for some reason they are very much underreporting this story. And then there is more, we understand.
Yes. That
there is volcanism, that your volcanoes in Mexico and your ground heating because of volcanism is way up. Is that true?
Yes, it's true. The volcán Popocatépetl became active in 1992, and every day is more and more active. Just last week, we have more than 30 eruptions, big and small, but we had 30 events, 4 days in a row. That has never happened since 1992. We are speaking here about the most dangerous volcano in the world, not just because we know that 23,000 years ago, the biggest explosion recorded ever in the history of the world. As we know, it happened here in the volcano Popocatépetl. This volcano has erupted so violently, at least 20 times more violently than the Mount St. Helens in the United States. Then you can understand what kind of volcano is this. We know that there are not big eruptions sometimes for thousands of years, but when there is one, and now the volcano is active, then this is very dangerous. We have been denouncing in our program, Third Millennium, all these situations. We have a live broadcast from an area close to the volcano where you have a city of 300,000, and people there don't know that there is a phenomenon called the pyroclastic explosions, which is gas over 500 centigrades to 800 centigrades, traveling from 150 to 400 kilometers an hour. This is an event that has happened many times around the volcano. We know there is a little villa that was on the base of this volcano that was completely extinguished 250 years before the Christian era. Then we know that this has happened there, and we know, for example, that in 1640 we have this hot gas coming from the top of the volcano. And we know that 14,000 years ago, this volcano covered with few meters of ash the whole Lake of Mexico. Then we have to understand this is a serious matter. Then we learned that 2 or 3 months ago, the other big, huge volcano of Mexico, the Pico de Orizaba, which is the third largest in North America, became also active.
All right, Jaime, I'm going to have to interrupt you at this point. We're at the bottom of the hour, and we have to take a break. So stand by. All of this is news that is not being heard until now in the U.S. Even the matter of the fires, which has been affecting U.S. cities, particularly in Texas, tremendously, has been underreported. And now we find out that there is new and active and very worrisome volcanism in Mexico as well. No doubt the source of some of the fires. We will ask. I'm Art Bell. Whitley Strieber and Jaime Maussan are my guests. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Art Bell, Somewhere in Time. Tonight featuring a replay of Coast to Coast AM from May 19th, 1998. Art Bell, Somewhere in Time. Tonight featuring a replay of Coast to Coast AM from May 19th, 1998.
It is, and I want to wish you all a very good evening or good morning, as the case may be in your time zone. Listen, everybody, I did get to see Lorena McKennett in Vancouver, and she was as incredible in person as she is when you listen to her here. So, there you are. What an incredible performance it was. Also, on my website right now, photos from the recent trip to Canada, as a matter of fact, some Seafund photos. You might want to take a look. There is a very important statement regarding Dr. Zahi Hawass from Graham Hancock and John Anthony West. That is on the website right now, and you're going to want to take a look at that. The Radio Ink magazine cover is up there. The New York Times article is up there. Lots of reasons to go up to the website tonight. In fact, now, at www.artbell.com. Now back to Whitley Strieber, and in Mexico City, Jaime Maussan. Jaime, if we might, I would like to ask you why you think the coverage in the press, in the media, is not what it should be of this very serious problem affecting your country and my country.
I don't have any idea. As you know, my country has been receiving very bad publicity for so many things: narcotics, drug, laundering, money laundering, and all that stuff. But when it comes to environment or other news, like probably sometimes massive sightings in Mexico of UFOs or things like that, they don't seem to care about this kind of news. I didn't know there was no in the news what we have in here, because it's affecting many states in the U.S. I received a call from Ohio today, from Chicago today,
yes,
and they are seeing and feeling the smoke. Then this is affecting now the U.S. This is not a problem of Mexico. This is a global problem, something that it should be worked together. All Central America needs a lot of help, because it's been so dry that we don't know this kind of situation ever in Mexico that has happened.
Not a delegation of 7 people to go down and study the situation. We need this is the largest coverage in terms of a smoke cloud, I think, in recorded history. It also, of course, changes the reflectivity of the atmosphere, and it makes it reflect more light, and that will change the weather, too, in unknown ways. You know, in my book, my last book, The Secret School, I included a group of prophecies, one of them about Popocatépetl becoming very dangerous. And these were based on a visionary experience that I reported, I believe, also in that book and elsewhere, of seeing the whole spine of the Americas like a gigantic map in my head. And I had the feeling that someone was warning me that a shadow hung over the Cordillera, and I used that exact phrase. And now it's like the shadow of smoke has appeared. And it's a very eerie feeling to have something kind of touching on one of those prophetic moments in one's own life. I don't know whether it's a coincidence, of course, or not, but the thing that one of the things I think, one of the reasons that there isn't more reporting about this is that people feel helpless. They don't know what they can do. What can the average person do about this? Well, actually, a lot. If there are 3 things you can do in your own home that will make a difference: wrap your water heater in an insulating jacket, caulk all heat leaks, and use energy-efficient shower heads. And you know what that will do? Those 3 things will reduce the amount of carbon going into the atmosphere, into the air, by 1,000 pounds a year per household. It's an incredible savings. And you can do it for $25.
Yes, Jaime, are people doing that kind of thing in Mexico now?
Of course not. We haven't taken this seriously up until now. It's like in the U.S., if you remember, in December there was a meeting in Japan, and they were discussing if there were enough evidences to accept that the world climate was changing. And they decided that there were not enough evidences. Then the compromise was a slow compromise. There was a lot of pressure in the U.S. not to take any compromise to reduce these carbon dioxide emissions.
That's
now
right.
We are seeing exactly what we thought we were going to see in 20 or 30 years. But now it's happening already.
All right. Well, I would like to break in here for just 1 second and ask Whitley. As you know, they had the fires in Southeast Asia that went on and on and on, kind of like the ones in Mexico are right now. We've had El Nino, and as Jaime said, I believe it's going to just go on all year, and we've got indications that it's building again already in the Pacific. So that would seem to fit your scenario.
It would fit the scenario. It fits the Nature's End scenario, which is coming true faster again. We had set our story in 2050, and it's not even 2000 yet, and it's in some ways worse than we thought it would be even 50 years from now. This situation has got to be dealt with. It's utterly fantastic that the United States actually, he's right, went to Kyoto in Japan and argued essentially against doing anything. It's like having a death wish. They know as well as you and I do what the actual situation on the ground is, but the reason that the American government is soft-pedaling this and ignoring this is because they just announced to the world that there wasn't a problem. Now these fires burst out a few weeks later, and they're left with egg on their faces, and so the response is silent.
All right, the other thing that we've got to know about, and we'll get out on these airwaves as long as we can, if the source of many of these fires is volcanism, then that is a very, very serious change and news that nobody knows about. Is that true?
Yes. We need to talk to you, Jaime, about hot spots. Tell us about hot spots and what they may mean.
We have many hot spots, not just in the volcano, but in different areas. For example, here close to Mexico City, close to a volcano that erupted 2,000 years ago and sent enormous, very big amounts of lava to the Lake of Mexico 2,000 years ago. Very close to that, we had a hot spot, 200 centigrade, just 3 or 4 weeks ago, and stayed there for almost a month. The people that walked over that point were completely burned, even dogs and a donkey. We were very concerned because we know in that area there have been produced 100 new volcanoes in the last 100,000 years. Then we have a new volcano every 1,000 years, and we haven't had one in 2000.
Now, Jaime, if I might, I didn't quite understand that. You said 200 degrees centigrade on the ground. You said that animals and people have been burned?
Yes, I said that. And the same is happening in the state of Mexico, where we have 3 hectares with something. The experts have been saying that this is an underground fire, not related to volcanism. But we have another hot spot close to the Bernal stone, which is very similar to this stone that you have in the Devil, the Tower Devil, or Devil of Tower.
Devil's Tower.
One that was used by Steven Spielberg in this movie. It's something very similar, close to that place. We think that probably we are having now a new volcano. It all means that we have magma underground. I mean, it's really hot. This is pure speculation, but some experts now are considering the possibility that some of this El Nino phenomenon, the one that we have this year, probably, and it's just a very small probability, but this exists, that this El Nino is related to volcanism under the sea.
Yes.
And then we will have warmer waters, because it's reacting very different than what we know in the past. This El Nino was going to be over in May or June, and now we know it's very strong again, and we know that the whole year 98 is going to be back, and we don't know what is going to happen next year. Then we have something very different than we had in the past. Then we have to analyze this very small possibility, but this is a very disturbing possibility.
You're saying
and there is another very important thing, Cart, if you allow me to tell this. If you remember, we have all these sightings. Many people have asked me, why Mexico? Why Mexico with so many sightings of UFOs? Remember that the first sightings back in 1991 were close to the volcano, close to Atlisco,
That's right.
an area that is a city that is very close to the volcano, and many, many people, thousands of people, saw UFOs there. We have now many videos of UFOs flying around these enormous volcanoes and other volcanoes in Mexico. In 1996, there was a team from the BBC and professors from the Norway University, and they brought a machine, and they discovered that under the Popocatépetl there was so much magnetism that was probably the most important spot in the world. And now probably we know that these objects have been there probably to tell us something, to attract our attention to that place, or probably because they are using some kind of energy that is right there and is the most important in the world. If you remember, I said from 1991 that we have most of the sightings along all the neovolcanic axis. Then now it's not a coincidence that this is happening all over this axis in Mexico, right, central Mexico. I think the UFOs now, I believe that I understand what is happening, and they are there because all these reasons. We discovered the activity of the Popocatépetl more than a year before that the university did. We did it in February 1992 because we went up there to see why there were so many reports. We went into the crater. We have the last video from inside the crater before it became active. Now, there was a lake there. There is no lake now. All the crater is covered with ash, and it's a very different scenario than we had in 1992. But all this was discovered, and they like it or not, was discovered because of this activity.
Of the
there
UFO
is no coincidence there.
All right. Whitley, let's ask him whether there is currently UFO activity going on associated with the volcanism. Are you still getting UFO reports in Mexico, Jaime?
Yes, we are still having. The last videos we have are very important. We have, again, we have more than 10 videos with fleets. That's a fleet is when we have 20, 30, 50, or 100 objects hovering in the sky or standing still. We have 10 videos to prove that. And the last video was shot on March 18th. We don't have more videos now because we cannot see anything. This is completely covered with smoke. We don't know if the UFOs are there or not any longer.
Oh, my God. Whitley?
Art, I have to tell you that this man, Jaime Maussan, I'm so glad people are getting to hear the voice of this extraordinary man from Mexico. I know Jaime well, and the energy and the intensity of what you're saying, Jaime, is just overwhelming me. And the knowledge that you have is absolutely amazing. And for a person with so much scientific knowledge and knowledge of the environment to also be so open to the message that is coming from the UFOs is just amazing to me. I wish there were many more people like that in the world and in the United States.
So do I. And Jaime, what I would like to do, if I can, is have both you and Whitley back on later this week, perhaps at a slightly later time, and update everybody on this. Could we do that?
Yes.
Yes, of course. I want to report anything that is happening here. I know your show is very important, Art. I know it's listened by many, many people in the U.S. I know it's a very good way to really tell the American people what is happening here. I want to interest now the scientists. I want to interest the universities to see if we are crazy here or if there is a relation of what is happening in Mexico with the presence of these little objects.
Well, I hate to say this, Jaime, but I'm afraid that there's more communication going on between your country and mine right now than there is at any other time of day.
That's right.
And so I appreciate it, Jaime. Thank you so very much, and we will call you later this week, all right?
Okay.
All right, Jaime.
Okay.
Jaime, thank you.
Okay,
right, take care.
Whitley. Bye.
Goodbye, Jaime.
All right.
Thank you, Whitley.
You're welcome, Jaime.
All right, bye-bye. All right, so there we are, Whitley. I wanted to take a minute at the end of all this to kind of sum up. So the fires that are affecting the U.S., widely affecting the U.S., are a product of both this El Nino business, wildfires, and volcanism, which is setting fires. I was really surprised to hear hotspots of, my God, 200 degrees centigrade would burn anything that walked anywhere near it.
Absolutely. The existence of this level of volcanic disturbance is not being reported at all in the United States. And it's really dangerous. When there's that much volcanic activity, and it's now been building steadily for quite a number of years, I was so fascinated by what he was saying. I mean, do you realize he was saying that the presence of the UFOs over Popocatépetl had drawn them to go up to the crater, and they literally took the last videos taken inside that crater before the volcano became active. You talk about communication. What could be clearer than that? Somebody was directing their attention, was warning them about those volcanoes, about that volcano. That's what it seems like to me.
Well, finally there began last week, toward the end of last week, a little bit of coverage on the Weather Channel, and they showed some pictures of Houston, and you couldn't see a damn thing. The skyline, the city, it was gone.
Friends of mine who live in Houston, who I just talked to shortly before, about an hour before the show, said that it is like nothing they have ever seen before in their lives. And even the local papers are not reporting it in any great degree. And people are scared. They're real scared in Houston, and then to a lesser extent, San Antonio is not quite as affected, but it's still quite bad there. My brother, who lives north of the city, said never in all the time he's been there has he gone out and not been able to see the city as he was going into town because of smog and haze. This is not a polluted place, San Antonio.
So, in other words, you think that in answer to why there hasn't been much press coverage, it's because the U.S. went to Japan and basically said there is not a problem, so we can't very well report on a problem now.
That's right. I think that is correct, and we have to face this thing. What's so ironic and so frightening about it is that it isn't. Neither industry nor the private individual would have to do very much to really reduce emissions, and we have got to do that worldwide because we've got a major problem going on with the weather. One of the things that he was also referring to was volcanism under the Pacific, and there's a study that's just starting to take place now to see whether or not the Pacific is literally being heated from beneath, then that the El Nino is not caused just by atmospheric warming, but also by warming from volcanoes underneath the ocean.
That's one possibility. Another, of course, is the activity on the sun. Listen, we're rapidly running out of time. I know you're on a book tour. Where are you going to be next?
Okay, today, Phoenix, tomorrow, Las Vegas. Incidentally, I want to say before we go, and I'm going to be very quick about this, I have a special on NBC in the fall, 2-hour special called Confirmation. If anyone has any video they would like us to look at, any pictures, send them to P.O. Box 7770, Burbank, California 91510. The mainstream television is getting into this at last, Art, and anyone who wants to fax us anything, 213-874-5964.
All right. Where are you going to be in Phoenix?
I'm going to be at Barnes & Noble Bookstore tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, from 7 until however long it takes. And tomorrow at noon, I'm going to be at 11:30 at the Southwest Storyteller, 455 North 3rd Street. And the crowds at these signings are often very big, but I sign every book, and believe me, you get a very interesting story, too.
Can you tell me, is there only one Barnes & Noble there?
No, it's Barnes & Noble, 10,500 North 90th Street.
Oh, in Phoenix.
In Scottsdale, actually.
In Scottsdale.
But
okay.
Scottsdale and Phoenix are close together.
Right. It's all sort of a metroplex these days.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I absolutely appreciate your coming on, my friend. And as I told Jaime, we'll try and do something later this week when time allows.
Right.
And do an update on all of this.
Yeah, we'll get it put together.
All right. Whitley, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Take care.
As always.
Take care, my friend. That's Whitley Strieber, author of Communion, and so many other books. He's got a brand new book. If you'd like to see him, I just told you where and how and all the rest of it. A 4-state network of health officials is investigating. This comes from KNBC, Channel 4 in L.A., is investigating more than 100 cases of what's being called X-file type illnesses. Apparently healthy people suddenly suffer fatal or near-fatal illness due to unknown causes. Researchers say the studies may also prepare state health officials in determining if sudden outbreaks of curious illnesses are the work or could be the work of bioterrorists. Whew. I'm Art Bell, and this is Coast to Coast AM.
Premier Radio Networks presents Art Bell, Somewhere in Time. Tonight's program originally aired May 19th, 1998.
Back from Alaska, back from Vancouver, my affiliate CFUN, where we did Dreamland. A few photographs on the website right now if you want to take a look at where I was. Studios of CFUN, manager of CFUN, whatever I could sort of snap. And we're going to get more up in the next few days, but we've got photographs up there right now. We've got a very, very, very important statement about Dr. Zahi Hawass. The statement made by John Anthony West and Graham Hancock for all of you to read. The Radio Inc. magazine cover is up there. The New York Times article is up there. A lot of things on the website for you to see this night at www.artbell.com. Coming up in a moment, a most unusual program. We are going to have a general class officer who will be, for obvious reasons, disguising his voice with a voice changer. We will have Dr. Roger Leir. We will have Daryl Sims, a 30-year ufologist, ex-CIA. And, of course, Dr. Leir, who has removed implants. And I'm sure you are familiar, I hope you are, with these gentlemen by now. And again, a general class officer who we will, for purposes of anonymity, simply call General A. In the last hour, we heard from Whitley Strieber and Jaime Maussan, the ex-60 Minutes anchor in Mexico, who said the fires in Mexico are being fueled not only by El Nino, but by underground volcanism as well. And several volcanoes are getting ready to let go in Mexico, so there is an awful lot going on. All right, here we go. Let's bring on Dr. Roger Leir, who's been on this program now a number of times, and Daryl Sims. Daryl is having a family emergency and may or may not have to leave us at some point during the broadcast. Daryl, how's it going?
Everything's fine.
Good. And Dr. Leir, are you here?
Yes, sir, I am.
Okay. Dr. Leir, I think that we'll leave it to you, if you would please, to introduce General A and what we're about to hear and why we're going to hear it.
All right, I'd be very happy to. This is sort of one of the interesting experiences in my life, and I think that your audience will be interested in the entire story. I've known General A for many, many years, and I understand as of late that he is just about ready to receive another star. So I'm very happy for him. This event happened on October the 3rd of 1996, and we had a nighttime meeting of the board from MOFON Ventura, Santa Barbara, which, as you know, I happen to be section director.
Yes, October 3rd, 1996, huh?
Yes, and our guest for the lecture meeting was Bob Dean.
Robert O'Dean. Yes.
Robert O'Dean. And we were very happy to have him that evening. We took him out to dinner, and unfortunately, he left his briefcase at the airport. Darrell also happened to be in town, and we were working on some potential implant surgical cases. Also, I might add, just as a side note, that on this coming Friday, we're having as our guest Walt Andrus, the international director
of MOFON, yes.
Of MOFON, yes. So if anybody's in the area that would like to hear him speak, it's held at the Thousand Oaks Library.
So anyway, Darrell forgot his...
No, it's Bob Dean.
Bob Dean, I'm sorry, forgot his briefcase.
Forgot his briefcase at Burbank Airport, so Darrell and I volunteered to go pick it up for him. So we left Thousand Oaks and headed east on the Ventura Freeway, the 101, or as in true sign direction, it's south, but actually the direction is east. And at exactly 8:46, 1 minute above 8:45, while traveling along the freeway and almost into the San Fernando Valley, suddenly night turned into day.
Night turned in. Now it's a very populated area.
It's quite well populated, but there are some barren hillsides that border the freeway in that section. And the traffic was, let's say, light for the Ventura Freeway. There wasn't that much traffic, but when this happened, everybody sort of came to a screeching halt. Darrell and I turned around and looked at each other because right next to us, to our left or north of the freeway, over the hills, somewhere between 800 and 1,000 feet in the air, was a brilliant gold, most beautiful ball of light that I've ever seen in my life, and it was trailing this pure white tail, and at the end of the tail there were what appeared to be sparks. So again, as I said, we were absolutely dumbfounded, and Darrell and I looked at each other. This probably went on for maybe 20, 25 seconds, and then it just went out.
Was this object, obviously from what you describe, one might conclude you were looking at a re-entering object of some sort?
Well, we thought that, that the first thought that comes to your mind is the most logical one, and we turned around and said to each other, is that a meteorite?
Yeah. Okay, well, Darrell, you're here. You saw it. You're a witness, too. Is that an accurate description?
It is not only accurate, it is put as good as I've ever heard it put. The windshield was so lit up when I looked out and saw this, what it appeared to be a meteorite, but it didn't. It really didn't quite make any sense to me because it had. I've never seen a meteorite enter like that, and I've seen over 50 UFOs in my life since childhood, and I've never seen a UFO like that. So I never. It never came across my thinking that it was UFOs, but that it was probably meteoric.
Darrell, when you said re-enter like that, exactly how did it go? Was this a horizontally moving object or what?
Well, it was. It did have a decline, but it was so brilliant in the sky and so quickly how it lit up, which didn't make sense to me. I mean, the meteorite should have lit up from a distance and then gone out, or got a little brighter and then gone out. But this thing lit the entire sky up. It started very quickly, and it was close. It was so close that I told Roger, I said, well, if that's meteorite, I said, as soon as it hits the side of that hill out there, there's going to be a fire, because the brush there is so dry in Southern California that time of the year that there'd be no question it'd be a fire. I mean,
moreover, 20 to 25 seconds is a very, very long time. You concur with that time?
Oh, yes, and it just makes no sense why it would be a meteorite. And of course, as you'll find later in the story here, when the general begins to make his statement, as well as Roger telling the rest of the story, you'll see that there, in fact, was no meteorite.
Roger?
That's the very peculiar thing I was going to mention was that when you stop and think about this logically, we've all seen meteorites shooting through the sky. You know why they're called shooting stars. You know, as a kid, you look for shooting stars.
Yes.
And once we talked about the Perseid meteorite shower in Alaska. But you know how fast they go. The other peculiar thing about this was it was not doing probably more than 100 miles an hour. You know, if we were going originally, let's say 60 on the freeway, it wasn't going that much faster than we were.
Any sound?
No sound whatsoever.
No sound. Is there any way that you could estimate the distance from you? You were talking about it possibly impacting a hill.
I would say, again, I do a bit of flying, so I have some judge of distance even at night. I would say it was between 800 and 1,000 feet above the terrain. Mm-hmm. And then probably from us, probably certainly not over about 1,200 feet.
All right.
It was pretty close.
All right. So night turned into day. This object traversed the atmosphere close to you and then blinked out.
Exactly. So we just continued on and both agreed that because the hills were pretty crisp that time of year, there's going to be one heck of a fire. And in that direction, north of the freeway, there's kind of an expensive housing tract in Bell Canyon. Mm-hmm. And Bell Canyon happens to sit on the southern slope of the hill where the Rocketdyne facility is on top of the ridge. So our only thought was the homes in Bell Canyon. So what we decided to do, because we were quite concerned about Bob Dean's briefcase, was just to continue on to Burbank Airport, get the task done, and we figured that by the time we got back, we were going to see a lot of fire trucks and helicopters and things all over the place. So that's what we did.
Okay.
We went. We fortunately picked up the briefcase, and I came back, and then I pulled off the road at the exact same spot where we saw this, and to our just utter amazement, there was nothing. There was no activity, no fire, no smoke, no helicopters, no fire engines, the usual amount of traffic, nobody saying anything about anything. So we stayed there for a bit and headed back to my home. And when we got there, I said to my wife, my gosh, you can't imagine what Daryl and I saw tonight going to the airport. And she says, oh, I know what you're talking about.
Oh.
That you do? How would you know that? She says, oh, it's been all over the news.
It's been all over the news.
So I said, that's interesting. Well, what is it that was all over the news? And so she says, oh, people were seeing this green fireball in the sky. And I said, well, what time were they reporting that? Oh, she says, it was exactly at 9 o'clock. And I said, well, that's strange, because the one that Daryl and I saw was exactly 8:46.
That is correct.
So I tried to watch something on the news, and there was a little blurb on Channel 2 out here, which is CBS, and not much of anything. So I just kind of, we were both mystified and didn't know what to make of it, and not long after that, I got a phone call.
Yes.
And the phone call was from my friend, the general, who happened to be in Lake Encino and was chiding me because he couldn't get a hold of me. And I said, what was so important that you needed to get me right away? And he says, I don't know what you guys are doing to me, but since you've gotten involved with this field, he says, all of a sudden I've seen the craziest thing tonight I've ever seen in my life. And what he described, which I'll let him describe in his own words, from this spot in Lake Encino, he would be looking towards the west, and high up on the hill, he would be looking down on this object.
All right. How much can you tell us? I understand the general is to be referred to as General A, and he's going to be anonymous for the A, I suppose. What can you tell us? How much can you tell us, if anything, about him?
Well, basically, the facts are simple. As with any rank of the military service, you have to be in for a certain amount of time to attain rank. He had a very unusual position because he did some services for President Johnson back in his early days, and basically, as a favor to Johnson, he was, let's say, endowed with certain things which I can't discuss. But back in the old days, he used to fly from Edwards Air Force Base to the East Coast in a very short period of time, and some experimental aircraft, and wound up knowing. He had a lot of high contacts and still does. Government. All right.
General, are you online?
Yes, I am.
Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
First of all, I guess I would ask why you feel the need to be anonymous, or is that going to be apparent as we hear your story?
It'll become quite apparent.
All right. Then why don't you go ahead and tell us what it was you saw and what you know?
Well, basically, we should start with Dr. Lear. He's been my doctor for over 30 years, and he spoke of the various things that he was involved in particular, of recent, the removal of these implants from possible alien implantations. As a matter of fact, he's made many, many tapes. I understand his tapes are just about sold out. Demand has been so huge. I myself have given certain people hundreds of these tapes, and I understand they're coming out more. That was my scratch-my-head type of meeting, saying, Dr. Lear, come on, UFOs and all these things, you're just pulling my leg. And I believed it halfway, and then I didn't believe it either. But with something of this nature and what we're going to speak about tonight, I'm a complete a believer in that which Darrell and Dr. Lear have been involved in. I was southeast. It was exactly 8:45 when I first saw it. I was further east than they were, so it would be just about right. Another 30 seconds, 60 seconds, the object would have approached Darrell as well as Dr. Lear.
Yes.
I was high up, so I saw this object coming at me, which was quite red, since I was looking at the fore part of it. And as it passed me, it turned gold, and that's the object color that Dr. Lear and Darrell saw. And then as it went past me, it had a silvery tail, long silvery tail, and went in a circle. But it didn't go straight. It actually curved around, across the valley, and went towards the old Rocketdyne site where they used to test the rocket engine and other things which we have found subsequent to that time. So the object, without question, was not an aircraft of our understanding of an aircraft. It could not be a meteorite. A meteorite does not turn and change directions or suddenly disappear.
So in other words, you would say it was under intelligent control of some kind.
Exactly. And it disappeared in the hills. No fire, no flames, no crashing. Just the bright light that lit up the sky suddenly became dark all over again.
Oh, my.
As far as I recall, there was only one television announcement
at the 11 o'clock news mentioning the fact that some meteorite had entered the San Fernando Valley and there was no consequence.
Of no consequence. You obviously don't feel that it was of no consequence.
Oh, obviously not.
All right. I'll tell you what, everybody. We're at the bottom of the hour, so I'm going to ask everybody to hold on, and we will be back to you very shortly. We're going to take a break here at the bottom of the hour. You're listening to Daryl Sims, 30 years a ufologist, ex-CIA. You're listening to Dr. Roger Leir, who has removed any number of implants over many years, and himself is a MUFON active member. And you're listening to a general class officer who we're going to refer to as simply General A. And we're listening to an incident that occurred October 3rd of 96. There is more to it. I'm Art Bell from the High Desert. This is Coast to Coast AM.
You're listening to Art Bell, Somewhere in Time. Tonight featuring a replay of Coast to Coast AM from May 19th, 1998. Somewhere in Time on Premier Radio Networks. Tonight, an encore presentation of Coast to Coast AM from May 19th, 1998.
Hi, everybody. Dr. Roger Leir, Daryl Sims, and General A, General Class Officer, which we will call General A, who is disguising his voice, is with us. Back to them in a moment. All right, Galaxy 4, the satellite Galaxy 4, is tumbling out of control. About midday today, for some reason, some unknown reason, it lost Earth lock, which means the satellite no longer knows where Earth is, and for some reason it is spinning in space, just simply spinning in space. And of no use to anybody. It has about 40 million pagers, which are gone now, and many television feeds as well. So something weird is going on. Controllers on the ground do have contact with the satellite, and of course they have hopes of getting it back online. However, as of now, we have lost Galaxy 4, which is a main television satellite. Interesting news, and only part of what is news this night. There's a great deal going on, including the fires in Mexico, due not only to El Nino, but to volcanism as well, as you learned in the first hour of the program. And by the way, if you don't get the first hour of the program, give your station a call and ask them to get it. That was a very, very, very important report. Now, back to my guests. Dr. Leir and Daryl Sims and General A. Gentlemen, you're all back on the air. So we now have this incident, this whatever it was, that entered our atmosphere or traversed our atmosphere. What can you tell me?
Well, Art, if you like the story so far, hold on to your hat because it's just beginning.
All right.
It's a lot better.
All right.
The very next thing that happened was that phone call. General A, I knew, had some ideas of his own, so I said, well, what do you think? And where do you think it went? I said, there's nothing in that area except perhaps, Bell Canyon with all the expensive homes. And he says, well, the other thing that's up there, of course, is the Rocketdyne facility on the ridge. He says, I used to go up there once in a while, he says, because I like the view and it's a nice place to take a walk and so on. So I said, well, why don't you maybe go up there and see if you see anything? And so he says, that's not a bad idea. I think I'm going to do that. So I said, are you serious? And he says, yes. So we left it at that. And that was it for the Friday night, which went off quite successfully with Bob Dean and the MUFON meeting. The following day, in the early afternoon, I got a call from the general again, and he said, well, I did what you suggested. And I said, what was that? He said, I went up to Rocketdyne. And now let's put him back on and tell you his first experience.
All right, General.
Basically, I'm a very scientific man. Things have to be in front of me. I have to analyze. I have to have laboratory reports if necessary before I go further with anything that I'm involved in. Now, with Dr. Lear and Darrell with their implant surgery, he actually showed me the implants, and he showed me reports showing that these implants were obvious without question extraterrestrial. So with that kind of background, I said, let me go on up and let me find out what's happening. Perhaps it might be something additional. I drove up the hill, and as I approached the hill, I was met by a group of special service type of personnel, military men, of course. They surrounded my car and asked me who, what, where. I said that I'd like to go forward and go on the property itself. I was in civilian dress, so obviously I couldn't jump out of the car and say who I was. I didn't have any of my identification with me. They were dressed. Now, this was over 100-degree temperature on top of a mountain, which is blackened with the heat of the sun as well as that which had occurred there. I was sweating profusely, but I was sitting. These were men outside in the hot air, in the sunshine, not one bead of sweat. They were probably two of the finest-looking soldiers I've ever met in my life. Their boots were like a mirror. Their uniforms were impeccable, with creases where they should be and not one wrinkle whatsoever. They had berets on with kerchiefs around their neck, with long-sleeve shirts and battle type of fatigue. And here it is, over 100-degree temperature. They looked remarkably similar to one another.
All right, if I might, General, where was this again? This was
on top of the hill where the Rocketdyne used to have their rocket testing launch pad. This is on top of the hill. This would be, it'd be northwest corner of the San Fernando Valley.
All right.
The Rocketdyne site. Now, Rocketdyne was taken over by Boeing as well as U.S. Energy, and they were performing who knows what. So I did arrive there with these men stopping me, and I jumped out of the car because I'm that sort of person, and they had weapons, and they drew their weapons and aimed their weapons at me. And,
oh, my.
I said, I'm not going any further. I said, I am an officer. They said, show ID, which I did not have. I said, I will be only too happy to do so. And they asked me to leave. With the type of weapons they had, weapons that are not available to the normal personnel in the armed services today that I'm aware of. Mm-hmm. I, without question, turned around, got in my car, and departed. I got down the hill, and I called up Dr. Lear and told Dr. Lear what happened, and I was angry because I usually get my way.
I understand.
And I said, I'm going up with an ID. If not today, I'll be up there tomorrow, and I'll find out what's going on. Because obviously something was going on. They had equipment up there. They had several trucks. They had a lot of Hummers, the type of Hummers that we were using in the Kuwait War. They had one large communication van with the spinning antenna on top.
General, what time of night was this, please?
It was the afternoon. It was about early afternoon sometime.
All right. And you're saying that the ground was charred?
Charred, black and hot.
Black and hot.
I just jumped out of the car, and standing there for a few moments, the heat came right through my shoes. It was that hot.
My God. So, all right, so I understand, with no ID and with weapons, you turn around and leave, you're angry, you're going to go back the next day.
That's right.
Did you?
Yes. I went back the next day. The same men were there. They stopped me. I immediately gave my ID. They snapped to attention, and they said, please stay here, don't move. They went to the communication van, and obviously checked out my identification, who I am, what I am, came back, asked for my fingerprint, my thumbprint, I think it was, and went forth and came back again saying, yes, sir. And it was probably one of the finest salutes I've ever had in my life. These men came to a complete rest. The weapons were down. I recognized some of the insignias. One of them was a Lance Corporal, and they were quite obviously wondering where I came from, who I came, and whatever. I'm associated with the White House, so they obviously discovered the fact that was the case, and they allowed me to do that which I wish to do.
All right, so you had, I understand, ongoing contacts back to the Johnson administration, but you have contacts in the current White House as well.
Yes, and the Pentagon, of course.
Of course.
That's one striking thing, as I told Dr. Lear and Darrell. Normally, soldiers of this caliber, I'd say in the early 20s, late teens, usually have cuts on their faces where they're unaccustomed to shaving, or they'd have zits or different things of that, which are, growing out of their puberty state.
Sure.
These men were immaculate. I mean, their skin was so fine and so good, and their posture and their attitude and their bearing was so overwhelming. It was obviously, well, let me not say the word, but I'm sure you understand who and what they were. They were for one purpose. They were in the military for one purpose, and they were there for one purpose, and they were alive for one purpose.
Well, I'm not sure I do understand. They were obviously guarding whatever had happened there, a site of some sort where...
Yes, they were obviously guarding the site where the object came down.
All right.
We later found out, or we felt, it was a craft, without question, a craft that was flying. It was definitely a craft that was not powered by the same power source that we have with our airplanes, and it was not of a jet quality that we thought in the very beginning, but later we did discover that they were of a nuclear nature.
Nuclear?
Yes, without question. And they were discharging nuclear waste and radioactivity in that part of the valley. There's a canyon that Dr. Lear mentioned, Bell Canyon, where the horses, the animals, the cats, and the dogs mysteriously died, and they're still dying, because the radioactivity exhausts are located in that canyon. And they're just afraid to tell the public because of the panic that would ensue or the difficulties that would ensue, and they feel that the public really could not take it.
I'd like to just ask General to go back to one of the most important parts of the story, was when the soldier came back from the communications trailer. He had made a statement about what he could tell them and what he couldn't tell them, and the time span that they would be there. Would you go ahead and tell them that, General?
I asked him what has happened here, what is going to happen, and give me the full details. And he said, I'm not positioned to give you that information at this time. You would have to call Washington to get, he said, to my own self, I don't really know myself. So he stopped at that point. What was the other point, Dr. Lear, that mentioned?
You told me that he had said that they were on a cleanup mission.
They were on a cleanup mission to clean up that which had occurred, and they'll probably be out there within a day or two. And he said, we're here on a special mission only, and we'll be gone, and the private guards or the private personnel, security will return and take care of it thereafter.
So, in other words, what was dismissed on California television locally as just a meteorite re-entering was no meteorite, obviously, at all, but was some sort of craft.
It was a nuclear-powered craft.
A nuclear-powered.
Without question. That came in, that was in trouble, and had landed there, had been repaired, had left, and they were cleaning up that which was left. Probably nuclear waste, to the best of our knowledge.
So some sort of nuclear-powered craft had I don't know if the right word is crashed, but perhaps crashed, or at least landed there, was repaired, and then again took off from that location?
Yeah.
General, have you tried to follow up with the White House, with the Pentagon, to find out any more?
Yes.
And
they said that the occurrence was a craft that was in trouble, that had to land, and this is quite common. Usually the crafts come in that are not in difficulties, and they routinely land there to obtain that which they need and take off as well.
Did they infer in any way to you that these craft are not ours?
That's a question I really cannot answer because of the restricted nature of it. But I would say yes.
Dr. Lear, can you, without question, confirm that the man we're listening to is General A, is in fact a general class officer, is in fact who he says he is?
Yes, sir. I've not only known him for over 30 years, but I've seen his military paperwork, and certainly as much as I've seen Daryl. And he's a very credible person. He's shown me things that I'm not at liberty to talk about, but really quite amazing. Also, he has agreed to impart some brand new information tonight, which I did not hear until he arrived here to do the show. And I'm sure that's going to be very interesting, and it'll also coincidentally tie in with what happened here. Now, if you want to go on.
My God, I mean, we're describing, nearly as I can tell, if I can read easily between the lines, we are describing just one in a series of many extraterrestrial landings or crashes and apparent cooperation with the U.S. military. Incredible, and this just occurred.
Yes, this was, as I said, over the weekend of October the 3rd, 1996. After this incident, of course, my email was filled with information having to do with people who had sightings of strange things all over the country. And I think if you recall, there was a story about a bolide, a meteorite that came into the Earth's atmosphere and then went right back or out again.
As a matter of fact, Doctor, there have been a whole series of reports of that sort, ranging from Greenland down to Arizona to Colorado. There have been a whole series above Colorado recently, and frankly, the descriptions are very much like the descriptions you and Daryl have provided. I mean, very much like those.
Yeah, we had some reports at this incident that this very same description was given to me on the email from various parts of the country. It was amazing. And, of course, also amazing was that the news was reporting this greenish thing that either people saw or didn't see. I don't know. But the story is not over yet.
Well, that object that the other people saw was 15 minutes after the event of which Roger and myself and the general saw. And another thing, too, Art, that might help a bit here on the discussion is that the general, his background and everything was verified by Michael Lindemann.
All right, that helps a lot.
Event. And this was it was crucial for Michael in his discussions concerning this event with him as well. And the general has a very, I how shall I say, a civilian oriented quality to his a lot of his work, and it doesn't.
Well, look,
he's a very unique and unusual job title description, and which, of course, you will not get into for various reasons, but. There's no question he's a general.
Yeah, I can vouch for Michael Lindemann 1,000%. He is one of the toughest, most skeptical investigators that I think we've got in the entire field. So if he has verified the general's validity, then I have no question about it. And, of course, Dr. Lear, if you have known the man for 30 years, then again, I have no question about the validity of the general at all. I am simply surprised that he's willing to come forward. And even with his voice modified as it is, there has got to be some danger to this. So, gentlemen, hold on. We will come back after the break and continue with this. How many of you out there have wondered about some apparent flaming object seen crossing our skies with sparks behind it? And, of course, everybody always says it's a meteorite. I'm about the only one who's been saying, how do you know it's a meteorite? And they never have an answer to that. Until you find one on the ground and you see, a meteorite, you have no way of knowing, do you? And now, with what you have just heard and what you are yet to hear, you have more of a reason than ever to doubt. I really do wonder how long they're going to let me do this, don't you? This is Coast to Coast AM. Stay right where you are.
You're listening to Art Bell, Somewhere in Time on Premier Radio Networks. Tonight, an encore presentation of Coast to Coast AM from May 19th, 1998. Art Bell, Somewhere in Time. Tonight featuring a replay of Coast to Coast AM from May 19th, 1998.
Once again, here I am. We're in the middle of very serious breaking news on all kinds of fronts. What we're doing on the air right now in itself, serious, very serious breaking news. My guests are Dr. Roger Lear. He's been on the show many times. He has removed any number of implants from people over the years, many, many years. As well, Daryl Sims, a ufologist, ex-CIA, and with us, a general class officer who is using a voice changer. As a matter of fact, I understand he is due shortly for another star. And what you are hearing is a most remarkable story. For example, this object that was seen near the Rocketdyne facility. Let me read you a fax I just got. Art, I saw the object overhead simultaneously with your guest's sighting. I live near Topanga Canyon Boulevard in Devonshire, several miles from Rocketdyne. I know the area very well, and I believe the story 100%. And we will kind of recap the story for those of you just joining us. I would like to add, though, there are some very serious things going on that also need your attention. On my website right now is a statement by John Anthony West and Graham Hancock regarding the status of Dr. Zahi Hawass. I recommend highly you read that as soon as you can. We will have a reply from the individuals mentioned shortly also on the website. There is a copy of the recent New York Times article, came out this last Sunday on me, a Radio Inc. magazine cover, and photos from the recent trip to Canada, including some photographs of the CFUN studios, of the manager of CFUN, Stu Ferguson. Lots of reasons for you to go up to the website at www.artbell.com. So in a moment, back to our guest. All right, one more item. There is so much breaking news. Galaxy 4, the Hughes Galaxy 4 satellite, is tumbling out of control. There are about 40 million pagers that have been affected. TV programs, feeds, have been affected. We have no idea what has caused this. It could have been hit. It could have been space junk. It could have been a meteorite. We don't know. The controllers don't know. They still have some level of contact, apparently, with the satellite, but it has become useless, rendering a lot of businesses temporarily useless. We're following that story. We'll let you know. Galaxy 4 out of control right now. Now, back to my guests, Dr. Roger Leir, Daryl Sims, and General A. Gentlemen, welcome back. We should recap for the audience that's joining now. Very simply, Dr. Leir, you and Daryl Sims were on your way to retrieve a briefcase for Robert O'Dean after a meeting, and you saw an object, I guess for about 20 or 25 seconds, traverse our atmosphere and suddenly blip out or apparently disappear somewhere near the Rocketdyne facility. Is that correct?
That's the gist of it, Art.
Yep. All right. Then we come to the general, and in the last hour, he described what he had done. He was curious. He saw the object, as my listener did, by the way, and went up to that facility without his ID, was encountered there, I guess, a number of military. Were they military policemen, General?
Yes.
Would you describe them as military policemen?
No.
They were not military policemen.
They were special services.
Special services. And they, in fact, drew weapons and pointed them at you and encouraged you to leave, which you did.
Yes. You
then got your ID, went back the next day, inquiring what had occurred, and they did some checking, came to full attention, recognized your authority, but still would not tell you what had occurred other than something had landed or crashed of a nuclear nature, and it had been repaired or something had been done, and it had taken off again. Is that correct?
That's right.
Now, since you've got White House contacts and Pentagon contacts, you did some checking and found out that, in fact, it had been an object that had come down. Is there any more you can tell us about what they told you?
Well, with further research over the last 2 years, I've found that which I can tell you about. that the so-called engines of nuclear power are being developed and have been developed beneath the ground in the Rocketdyne site, which many, many people are aware of. It goes down as much as 10 to 15 stories into the ground, and they were developing the nuclear engines for these craft. It would be simple for a craft that was in trouble to land there and be repaired, but usually it's repaired in desolate areas where there's no contact of the public. The key thing to the whole thing, Art, is they feel the public will not believe anything about UFOs, and that's the power they have. They feel that if the public is ignorant enough and they make a laughing or a joke out of almost everything and anything about UFOs.
Yes, I know.
And I'm sure I've heard so many wonderful things about yourself, and obviously you are aware of what's happening. So they try to discredit people by laughing at people, making jests of that which is going on. Things that I have seen are normal to me, and if I just speak to anyone like Dr. Lear or Daryl, they understand. But to the normal public, the so-called international military complex, which controls all of this, as I'm sure you're aware and your listeners are aware of, they say one thing: the public cannot handle it. And when you can't handle something, you laugh.
Yes, you're exactly right. General, here's somebody who's a skeptic and says, Art, if General A is truly a general and is frightened enough that he is coming on anonymously, why would he give enough information about his personal encounter that could easily be traced back to him by others at the scene?
I want to jump in and answer that, and then the General can make further comments.
Dr. Lear, go ahead, Doctor.
The reason, in the first place, that he consented to come on the show is as a personal favor to me. Secondly, he is familiar with you and your program, and has an extremely high regard for you and the material that you put out over the air.
Well, thank you.
Nextly, he is in a position where he is not going to reveal any information that he absolutely cannot reveal. And if he has further reason, I will let him tell you personally.
Well, I did ask him if this was, in effect, ours or theirs, and he seemed to stop at that point and suggest that he couldn't say any more. But,
yes, and I'll continue doing so. Let's say that I have been given clearance to speak about what we have spoken about tonight without revealing anything. And the old story comes back again. If by accident I were to reveal things that I should not have, they're quite confident that the public will disregard it and say, hey, let's discredit again.
You've been given clearance to reveal what you have revealed thus far tonight.
Yes.
Why do you think they gave you that clearance?
Because it's well known among certain people, and the other people they're not concerned with. The general public, they could not care about.
They don't care about the general public?
Because the general public will ostracize it, make a joke of it, and walk away. And they realize that's their strength.
But if they gave you clearance, General, that must mean that they want at least some portion of the public to understand what's going on.
Yes.
So is there a program of intentional, slow information being leaked out through people like yourself?
Let me answer that with one word: possibly. You hit it right on the head, Art.
Even with all of this said, and your relationship over 30 years with Dr. Lear, and your respect for my program, there still has got to be some sort of threat to your career. Otherwise, you could give us your name, and you wouldn't have to use a voice changer, and you could just say what you were going to say. Say, I'm authorized to say the following.
I'm not afraid of the military. I have complete control of that. I'm afraid of the non-military element, and that's why my voice is described.
You're afraid of the non-military element?
Someone asked me, I'm not a military man. That's strictly a secondary portion of my life. My primary portion of life is a philanthropist.
I see. All right. Well, I don't want to dig into the specifics because I don't really.
That's not important.
Doctor, are there any areas that we're missing?
Yes, we haven't completed yet. I want to go on to the following day, which will now bring us to Sunday of that same weekend.
All right.
During the day, I think it was about 11 o'clock in the morning, I received a telephone call from our MUFON astronomer. And he had heard about the sightings over the Rocketdyne area and asked me if I had any further information, and I said I didn't. And he said, well, my nephew and myself were coming in to Simi Valley from the San Fernando Valley, and this would have been the same day, which would have been Saturday. And he said, we saw the strangest thing. And I said, well, Bob, what did you see? And he said there was a whole contingent of military that were on the hill by a street called Cooner Drive, which is the north side of the Simi Freeway. So if you can kind of picture this, we got the 101 south of this mountainous area, and then north of it we got the 118 or Simi Freeway. So now north of the Simi Freeway, he sees a military contingent, tells me that they pulled off because they were curious as to what was going on. He says they pulled over and parked, both he and his nephew, and got out of the car and looked across the street. There was two individuals in the same military garb as the general described that were crossing the street. One of these was a female, and the nephew had made the comment, gee, she was one of the most beautiful females I have ever seen. And I said, Bob, just a minute. Aren't we talking about the military? I said, well, that must be rare to see such a beautiful girl in the military. You usually don't see that sort of thing. And he said, well, she was absolutely perfect in every way, shape, or form. So I said, well, maybe this is a young fellow's description. But then they went on to tell me that there was another one on the other side of the street who looked like it could have been her twin.
Huh.
So I said, what were they doing? And he said, well, they had a number of vehicles there, and it looked like they were looking for something because they appeared to be scouring the hillside. So he shouted across the street, hey, what's going on with you guys? And he says, they shouted back, we're just doing a little cleanup, sir. We'll be out of here later in the afternoon, and it'll be open to the public again.
Wow, weird.
So he and the nephew got back in the car and went home. And I said, boy, that's it. Now my curiosity is just absolutely beyond belief. I said, how about meeting Daryl and I at that site the following morning? And he said, of course, be happy to. So we went out there. It was about 10 o'clock the following morning. Daryl and I went, and we brought along a few small instruments, a Geiger counter, a Gauss meter, several different cameras, and instruments of that nature. And the temperature was extremely hot. And I'm going to let Daryl take it from here and tell you what we saw and what he found.
All right, Daryl?
Well, basically, what we saw up on the site, having been in the military myself for 3 years, there were Hummer tracks in a number of places. You could tell that just by the wide track and the tires, and they were all over the hills there, up in the roads and driving even off the roads in different locations. And it was obvious from the tracks and from the way that the tracks were laid that they're literally driving all over the hill. They're looking for something. I have no idea what that might be, only that there seemed to be something they were looking for. We also found evidence of which you will normally have in a military contingent on the field like that, a water truck with a large canvas bag which holds water, and and normally these will leak out quite a bit of water, or they'll even dump it when they leave. Mm-hmm. There was a large body of water there beneath the, it looked like a deuce and a half a truck based on the tires I saw there, the tire prints. And as we understand it, the whole area had been cordoned off, and which is rather interesting because that's public property.
Let me bring somebody on very quickly. This person claims to have seen the same object at the same time, and this person claims it was 100 feet above his head. It's somebody whose name, I believe, is Mozzie, and I'm going to try and get him in here. I don't know if I can. Let's see if I can do that. Hold on here. Let's bring everybody back at once here. And for some reason, I can't seem to get Mozzie on. Doggone it. Gentlemen, hold on just one moment while I try and get Mozzie on. Mozzie, are you there?
Hello, Art.
All right. Would you please describe what you saw, Mozzie? Where are you, first of all?
I'm in Modesto.
Modesto?
Yes.
Uh-huh. Where were you when you saw this?
Well, my wife and I were coming back from L.A. going up the mountain, and from what I understand is Dr. Lear was going down the mountain, going, I believe, south, because he said the object was about 800 to 1,000 feet above him. As we came up the hill, it's exactly as he said. In an instant, it just turned into daytime. The entire field of view, front to back, left to right, was completely illuminated, and an object flew directly over us.
Did it have any discernible shape?
I couldn't really see a shape because I was driving. My wife got a better look at it than I did. But what I noticed was it had a large tail, and it did shoot off sparks, kind of like a sparkler, but we couldn't hear anything. And as it passed over us, it seemed to have either hit the hill or went over the hill where we were.
Apparently it hit the hill.
And it just blacked out, and it was over just that quick.
Dr. Lear, are you there?
Yes, I am.
That sound about right to you?
It sure does. What we later come to agree upon is instead of impacting there where we thought it was going to, General A saw it make a turn, and if the calculation of the turn was correct, it would have been heading directly for the ridge, which is the Rocketdyne site. So it would disappear from view on one side, and then you wouldn't be able to see it anymore.
All right. Mozzie, I really want to thank you for confirming this. You're about the 50th person. I've got faxes all over the place, and I just picked yours to call you up and let you say what you wanted to say.
Thank you, Art.
Thank you very much, and take care. All right. Now, let's go back to General A. Well, as a matter of fact, another half hour has passed, so gentlemen, hold on a moment. We'll be right back. Darrell Sims, Dr. Roger Lear, and General A are my guests. Something nuclear landed or crashed. There was a big military contingent. Some work was done on it, and then it left. I'm Art Bell. This is Coast to Coast AM.
You're listening to Art Bell, Somewhere in Time. Tonight featuring a replay of Coast to Coast AM from May 19th, 1998. Premier Radio Networks presents Art Bell Somewhere in Time. Tonight's program originally aired May 19th, 1998.
We have General A with us, as well as Daryl Sims and Dr. Roger Lear. General A is known, in fact, to be exactly who he says he is by Michael Lindemann of the 2020 Group. General A is known to be who he says he is by Dr. Lear, who I have a great deal of trust in, and who has known him for 30 years. 30 years. So we'll get back to these gentlemen in a moment. Next time you see a meteorite, well, let me correct that. Next time you see something crossing the atmosphere, some sort of fireball, whether it's in Colorado, Arizona, Greenland, or any part of the U.S. where they've been seen so frequently, so recently, and you hear on radio or TV that it was a meteorite, you might want to wait until they show it to you, until you believe it. All right. Somebody writes, I'm disappointed. I was expecting you to talk about the debate. You've hyped it for weeks. Indeed. If you guys have taped it for sale, I'll be really angry. No, we did not. We certainly did not. We did not tape it for sale. If you want to know what occurred, one very important thing that occurred during the debate, simply go to my website and read the statement by John Anthony West and Graham Hancock. If I can get to it, I'll read it later. But I think you should read that. It's on the website right now, and it's going to begin a kind of a mini war here because there is a response being written now to it, which we will also place on the website, despite the anguished cries of those who feel wounded by this statement from John Anthony West and Graham Hancock. Back now to my guests and an absolutely remarkable story of what was thought to be a meteorite, but obviously was not, was some sort of nuclear craft which either crashed or landed, was serviced and or fixed, and once again took off. Gentlemen, you're all back on the air. Dr. Lear, I'll leave it to you to give us direction here.
Yes, Art. I think that we need to go back to Daryl because I don't think that he finished the description of what we saw on those hills and fields that day.
Daryl?
Well, what we saw there that seemed to it fascinated me was the mere fact that there was so much military hardware out there that they had cordoned off the whole entire area on public land. Without anyone's permission. They just simply went out and posted up a huge sign that said, keep out, this federal property. Well, it isn't federal property. It's public land.
Ah.
And that was just amazing to me. They went out and just dug a couple holes, stuck up this huge sign, and so it's kind of like the IRS. You get this little letter from them in a brown envelope with Internal Revenue Service in the corner, and it just seems to terrorize people.
Sure.
So these people stick up a sign, and everybody assumes that that's supposed to be the federal government because there's a sign there. Well, that wasn't the case, and so after they did their deal and scoured the entire mountain area there, then they left. And, of course, we got there the next day and saw the evidence of that everywhere. We saw a number of strange things. We found some materials that we're still looking at as try to have evaluated. Nothing remarkable in my view. And then during the course of my scouring the hills there with this one gentleman, I'm telling you, it must have at least been 105 degrees. It's the hottest I've ever seen in Southern California during that time. And Roger is underneath a tree there with looking around, and just as I come down the side of the hill, he reports one of the most unusual things I've ever heard from him during the course of this. I'll let him describe that while this occurred while we were looking around on the side of the hill.
Doctor?
Yes, Art. I'm not exactly in the perfect physical condition to be running around up and down hillsides at 105-degree temperature. So I sort of bowed out, and I took my binoculars and a jug of cool water, and I went down under the shade of a tree and refresh myself with some water. So while I was standing there, I took the binoculars and I was looking at the ridge where the Rocketdyne facility was, just to see what was going on. I didn't really expect to see anything, and I noticed something moving, and it was a vehicle of some sort, which I finally came to the conclusion that it was a truck that was driving up there. That wasn't very exciting, but for whatever the reason, I just kept looking, sort of following the truck, and suddenly I saw what I thought was an aerobatic aircraft doing some strange aerobatic maneuvers right over the area where I'd seen the truck. So I had a pretty good pair of binoculars, and I steadied it on a tree branch to try and get a better look, because I thought somebody might have picked up an Aerobat or a Citabria at one of the local airports, and for whatever the reason, they were practicing maneuvers there. So I finally got fairly well focused in on this aircraft, and the first thing I noticed was it didn't have any wings.
No wings?
No wings. And I'm telling you this as the sort of a replay of the thoughts that went through my mind. I said, oh, gee, there's a plane with no wings. That's strange. And a few seconds later, the sun was still in the east. And the next thing that happened was the sun caught the glint of this extremely shiny metal, and I realized that, lo and behold, what I was looking at was a disc.
A disc?
A disc. A perfect round disc. And I was looking at, would it either be the bottom or the top of it? I couldn't tell. But what happened was that no sooner did I recognize that it was a disc than, if you can picture this, the disc turned so that it was parallel with the top of the ridge, like a coin in the air. It went straight down, and that's it. Show was all over, folks, because it was gone.
Good Lord.
I didn't have time to yell, hey, guys, Daryl, come down, nothing. It just happened that fast, and the other thing that I noticed was that when I couldn't see the disc anymore, the truck was no longer there either, so I don't know where it went. I don't know what happened to it, but it did go straight down, and it was parallel with the ridge.
All right. Let me try this question on the General. General, would you imagine, or would you say that we should imagine that the work of Dr. Lear in implant removal and the kind of thing that you just went through, the encounter that you just had, General, would be possibly connected?
Yes. There's two signs up on that property. The first sign, as you go up the hill, says Boeing Energy and Research. There's another sign as you go further up the hill to the sites where the object landed, the vehicle, U.S. Department of Energy Research Division. Now, what does that tell you?
It tells me that that they're monitoring or doing something which might be nuclear. And
you're going back to the implants. The implants are what? Could they be a monitoring device? Is there a reason to monitor certain people?
Apparently so.
That's right. It's not a national, it's an international situation.
You obviously know a very great deal more than you can say, is that correct?
But what I'm giving you is knowledge on a very, very slow basis. If you were to impart all the knowledge and all the various events that are occurring, the public could never handle it.
All right. Well, there we go. Now, about 30 years ago, it's a subject brought up many times on this program. There was a study done for the government called the Brookings Report, which basically suggested that exactly that. The public could never handle it.
I would say 95% of the, I'd say higher, maybe as much as 98% of the public would never believe it, first of all. The self-bomber, that was 50 years ago. When I saw the self-bomber about 30, 35 years ago, I said, oh, my God. And they were still fighting. They were still flying the the planes and the jets we have nuclear-powered vehicles now.
We do.
Nuclear-powered vehicles that could go from here to New York, which I have been, and not recently. I'm talking about 10 years ago. And I got there in less than 1 hour. My friend said, "Oh, no." I said, "Well, why didn't you call me back?" They called me back. I was in Long Island in less than 1 hour.
10 years ago, General?
Over 10 years ago. The vehicles they have now, I wouldn't even attempt to find you. You couldn't comprehend what's going on. The vehicles, the weapons that the United States has right now, we just reveal to our enemies, so to say, if there are any left in the world, the type of what can I say, type of armament we have. That's why all of a sudden the world has been so quiet and peaceful.
Wow. General, you said something earlier that I found intriguing. You said you're not worried about the military. You said you're worried about others,
Yes.
civilians or people that are in control of these programs that have nothing to do with the military. Would that be a proper characterization?
Yes, that's right.
Art, the General, before we should happen to run out of time, the General promised me that he would reveal something that he's never talked about before, having to do with earthquakes. And he was just telling me a little bit about it before we went on the air, so it's just about as new to me as it is to anyone else, and I'm going to ask him if he would share that with us.
General?
Well, recently we've had several small earthquakes, supposedly earthquakes, in the San Fernando area or Los Angeles area.
That's right.
They're not earthquakes. They were our nuclear weapons being tested beneath the ground, in particular towards the Reagan Library and towards the Rocketdyne site and other sites. And they were shown to be earthquake type to hide the fact that nuclear type of experimentation, evaluation, testing, whatever you want to say, wording, was being performed.
My God, General, that would mean that we are in violation of the very treaty that we are screeching and screaming about right now with regard to India's testing.
Exactly right, and that's why India is laughing at us, but the press doesn't reveal that. Pakistan's saying, if you're testing them, why can't we test them? But you don't hear about that. And the only reason I'm saying it is because no one's going to believe me either, and that's the power. That's the power. The public is told India is bad, Pakistan is bad, we're so pure and white. The strange part of it, some of our leaders are not aware of what's going on.
Now, I'm just a layman. I'm just a talk show host, General. But it would seem to me that if you were authorized to say some things with reference to that craft that came down, okay, I can understand that. But I cannot believe that you would be authorized to say what we thought were earthquakes were actually nuclear tests. I mean, that would be so sensitive that I would think that whoever they are, they would come and get you. Are you not worried about that?
They're not bomb tests. They were energy tests.
Energy tests.
So that defines it, and that protects it, and that puts a veil on it, and there's nothing to hide. It's energy testing. Now, we have lots of faults out here in California. If you shake the ground hard enough, any pseudo-earthquake type of reflex will occur in the earth. And that's what happens.
My
it's
God.
not supposed to be authorized or otherwise. It's, let's say, common knowledge among those who should know about it, and that's all that's important. The public's not going to believe it.
You know what? You're probably right. And I mentioned the Brookings report a little while ago.
Yes.
I'm talking to somebody who has the resources, the money, to do another Brookings report. It has now been 30 years since the last one. My feeling is, if we did one, it would come out about the way the first one did. A lot of people say, look, 30 years have passed. We can take it now.
Right.
Tell me I can take it. But the answer is, and you're saying, no, not much has changed.
I would say you're absolutely right. Art, you hit it right on the head.
Oh, boy.
before we had World War II, we had international cartels, as you probably remember,
yes.
IG Farben and other cartels. And the cartels are with different names now, with different parties, but they still control.
All right. Dr. Lear, Daryl, anything else we need to get in?
The only other thing that I'd like to reiterate, if I've missed this at all, is when we first saw the object on that day coming across the mountainscape there, it looked like to me, after we began to discuss this a bit, I said, Roger, this to me, it doesn't look like a meteorite because it's not functioning like one. It doesn't make any sense the way this is happening. I've seen plenty of meteorites. I lived in New Mexico and for years. I mean, there's very clear skies there. And I said, for lack of a better illustration, I said it looks like something re-entering the atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
How a fire would come around it if it were too hot. And I said that's what it looks like to me. And I was just I said either way, it's going to cause a fire when it lands. There's no question about it because there's a lot of grass up there.
Mm-hmm.
So apparently this thing, according to the general and the other witnesses, landed in a rocky area where there was not a grass area. In other words, it was a controlled landing, whatever it was.
That's right.
We've discussed some of the details, how it is when you rehash things and the witnesses all get together and reach certain conclusions that we didn't before. Now, looking at it from a different angle, see, I never saw this. Daryl, I'm sure, didn't see it either, this red corona that was out in front of it.
No.
But the general did.
I was in front of it, that's why.
So perhaps, maybe some of whatever the energy system is in this thing was either leaking fuel and that was burning as it was going through the atmosphere.
So the powers that be, for lack of a better phrase, are allowing all of this to be said because, in their view, the public isn't going to believe it anyway. However,
the question is not believing it. Let's say they're not prepared to accept it. Let's say it that way.
They're not prepared to accept it. And yet, there's got to be some underlying motive beyond that to allow somebody like yourself to come on the air, General, and say these things. And I can only imagine that it's some sort of slow information channeling.
It's not myself. I'm definitely not the first. I'm way in the back. There are many other episodes and other men who have come forth. It's a slow education, and they want to, but they can't leak the whole thing out all at one shot.
All at one shot.
Daryl and I get asked quite often, how come you guys do these implant surgeries and you're able to take these objects out and get them analyzed and so on and so on, and other people have done it and they come up with nothing. And either jokingly or actually seriously, I've said, well, maybe we're supposed to be doing that.
Yep. Well, I have the same attitude, Doctor, about this program. I do it. I'm fascinated by it. It is the subject material I deal with, but I think that I'm well aware that I could be part of a program designed to get this information out in bits and pieces and starts and stops, exactly as we have done tonight.
How many years have you been on the air?
I've been on the air for, doing this current talk show, General, about 14 years.
I would say, let's say 20 years ago. Do you think someone like yourself would get sponsors or stay on the line very long?
Not a chance, General.
There's your answer.
All right.
We need more people like you, Art. The public deserves to be educated, to give them a better life, a better future, and a happier determination of what the future is going to hold for them and their children.
General, thank you. Daryl Sims, thank you. Dr. Lear, thank you. Let's see what the public has to say about all of this. So good night to you all.
Good night, Art.
Good night. Art.
Take care. My, oh my, oh my. Comments, please. I'm Art Bell. We'll get to all the breaking news when we come back. I mean, the rest of the breaking news. This is Coast to Coast AM.
You're listening to Art Bell Somewhere in Time on Premier Radio Networks. Tonight, an encore presentation of Coast to Coast AM from May 19th, 1998. Premier Radio Networks presents Art Bell Somewhere in Time. Tonight's program originally aired May 19th, 1998.
Morning, everybody. I'm Art Bell. This is Coast to Coast AM. Art, please describe any symptoms of the, in quotes, X-Files sickness. I don't have them, my friend. This is Ken in San Ramon. My two boys have been sick with vomiting, headaches, the older for nearly 3 weeks, the younger for a couple of days now. The doctors cannot diagnose it other than to say some type of unknown virus. It wasn't near fatal, but he was sick bad enough to stay out of school. I wish I could give you symptoms, and I went to my source at KNBC in Los Angeles and asked for exactly that. When I get it, if I get it, you'll get it. West of the Rockies, you're on the air. Good morning.
Good morning, Art. This is Ken in Marina, California.
Yes, sir.
I think, how well do you know that general?
I don't know him at all.
I'm not sure he's a legitimate general.
However, Dr. Lear has known him for 30 years.
Yeah, but he's ex-CIA.
No, he is not. Darrell Sims is ex-CIA.
Okay,
Dr. Lear is
Excuse me, I'm sorry I said that.
Dr. Lear is a regular physician. He's a regular doctor.
Okay, Art, you were in the Air Force, correct?
I was, yes.
Okay. Didn't they teach you in basic training that you were supposed to have your ID card on you 24 hours a day?
They did, but...
And the general didn't have one?
You might want to consider the possibility, because I didn't ask him, because I really didn't think I should ask him, but he may be a reserve general. Had that occurred to you?
He still should have his ID card, even if he's a reservist, 24 hours a day.
No. The other thing is...
That's military regulations throughout the military, Art.
The other thing is, sir, that Michael Lindemann, who is a very careful researcher, also vouches for this general's credentials. Now, if you want to ignore all of that, including a doctor who's been treating this general as a patient for 30 years, fine.
This man is supposed to be a general and was without a military ID card. That's highly irregular, Art.
Okay.
I mean,
look,
there are other things too.
Sir, you are more than welcome. You're more than welcome to believe whatever you like.
There are several things that he said does not equate to the military.
Okay.
For example, he said, well, there was insignia I recognized, one of which was a lance corporal, saying essentially that he didn't recognize the rest of it. Now, if he was a general, he should be able to recognize most military insignia from nearly any place around the world.
Okay.
There's just too many things about this guy. I don't think he's a general.
Okay.
I just don't. I mean, I'm a former drill sergeant. I live within blocks of former Fort Ord. I was a drill sergeant at Fort Ord, and there's too many things, too many discrepancies in what that man's saying.
Okay.
I want to say this. I think your program, and I'll be very honest. I have to be honest because I'm an honest sort of person. I think that your program is a lot of sensational radio.
Okay.
But I also have to say that the one thing, if there's anything that your program should do, is make the American people think. Because that's what seems to be lacking in this country more than anything else. And my request, and if I can do this, my request to the American people that are listening right now, think for yourselves, think your way through things.
That's what this program is designed to do.
Well, oftentimes some of the people you have on there, I have to say, I've talked to you a long time ago. I haven't talked to you in about, a couple of years. But one of the things I have to say is a lot of what you have does seem to be sensationalism.
Well, there's a lot of sensational stuff going on.
How much of it's factual? That's the problem. And people need to delve into what's really the fact.
Okay, what would you say to all these people who live down in that area and have either faxed or called in and say they saw the exact same thing?
Well, see, I'm not denying the story. I won't deny that story because there's thousands of cases.
Yeah, but in for a penny, in for a pound. I mean, either this incident occurred or it did not occur.
Well, like I said, I'm not going to deny. I wouldn't deny that it happened because there's too many people seeing too many things in the last, who knows how long, in the last 50 years or so, or even before that. I wouldn't try to discredit all those people, but I think that oftentimes what we have going on is a massive disinformation campaign. Disinformation is not the same kind of disinformation that we had in the 60s. The disinformation we have today is more than mixing facts with
I don't doubt that for a second.
What?
I don't doubt that for a second.
Oh, gosh, the disinformation is so thick. All you have to do is turn on the radio and you hear it, and they ignore all the other stuff. One of the things, you often talk about the quickening.
Well, let me ask you this,
sir.
sir.
That in a long time.
Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
If there is something going on that we are not to be told about, do you think it more likely you're going to hear it on Dan Rather, Tom Brokaw, and that bunch, or here?
Oh, you're going to hear it on your program first. But that's where the American people that are listening have to sort through what's reality and what's fiction.
I tell them that all the time.
And well, do it more often.
All right.
Do it more often. One of the things I'd like to say is the last couple of days it was announced by the Justice Department that the crime rate is down for the sixth year in a row.
That's correct.
And it's 4% lower. Well, if you figure that out...
In just about every single category, actually.
Yes, and that means it's down to 75% what it was 6 years ago.
Now, there's one area where that's not true.
And where is that, Art?
Youth.
Yeah, that's... well, I don't know. I don't know how to work on that one.
Look, I've got to run. I appreciate your call. I appreciate your call and your comments, but I've got to scoot.
Okay.
Take care. I have always told my audience that. Obviously, with the kind of material, actually, I shouldn't even have to really tell you. With the kind of material I'm presenting, you've got to be the judge yourself. However, in the case of the general, it's kind of like giving people a photograph. I can put a photograph on the internet, a real one, somebody who has hoaxed something. It doesn't matter. If it's as real as can be, I guarantee 1 million people will pick it apart in 1 million different ways. It's kind of like doing a giant Rorschach test, And with regard to General A, there are lots of people who are going to be able to pick apart this or that. Now, I have no idea why he had no ID with him on that particular night. Perhaps we can have him back on and ask that. Nevertheless, he did go back and get ID and return to the site the next day. Here's one for you. Africanized killer bees have claimed their first fatality in California since migrating to the U.S. 7 years ago. This one, a dog tied to a tree where they were nesting. The pit bull, named, get this, Killer, was in the backyard of an El Centro home when it was stung by a swarm of aggressive bees last week. Genetic testing by the State Department of Food and Agriculture confirms the stings were indeed from Africanized bees. Quote, "This is the first confirmed death of an animal or person by Africanized bees in California." That's a spokesperson for the State Department of Food and Agriculture. So they are here. West of the Rockies, you're on the air.
Hello?
Hello.
Is this the Art Bell Show?
It is.
I have some information on eugenic soldiers. I heard the general talking about the cloning.
Well, no, he didn't say that. He said...
Implying the cloning.
The clear implication, yes. Mm-hmm.
So implying the cloning, and I grabbed my Dolores Cannon book where she interprets the Nostradamus quatrains, and she speaks in two places of eugenic soldiers.
Would you turn your radio off, please?
Okay.
All right. Well, yeah, I mean, clearly what he said, a lot of people said, well, why didn't you ask him? I didn't have to ask him. I think clearly that he was suggesting that might be the case.
Yes, I understand that. But I just thought the connection was very interesting to what Dolores Cannon's interpretation was of Nostradamus' quatrains.
What did you think of the general in general?
I picked up on a couple of the military things, too. It's odd that he didn't recognize some of the insignia. However, if he was like Air Force and those were Army uniforms, that might explain that.
Yes, it might. And I think he indicated they were some sort of special function troops.
But, yeah, maybe their ranks are different. I don't know.
Yeah, could be. I appreciate the call. Thank you. As I said, a presentation of that sort is kind of like a giant Rorschach test, and everybody either picks something apart or notices something different or hears something a little differently, and so you get many, many different reactions. Wildcard line, you're on the air.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm calling from Ventura County.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm just a hop and a skip and a jump over the hills towards the coast. I happen to believe very strongly in this story. I frequent a computer bulletin board on one of the major service providers, and there was that night and for several weeks thereafter was just jumping with all kinds of people writing in notes. I saw this, very much the same explanation.
I know.
The fireballs, the latest one that I've seen personally was the last Sunday in April, and the time was exactly the same, 8:46 p.m. I saw it was a greenish, whitish orb.
Here we go.
Going very swiftly and not vertically, but more horizontally, and with a very long white tail. And my daughter and I saw it disappear, and that was it.
I appreciate it. You're one of many, many, many.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Art.
Take care. Now, at some point, you've got to begin to say to yourself, well, something significant obviously occurred. I suppose you could imagine the general was here to try to disinform with respect to what it was. But it seems to me the disinformation was the meteor story. And with respect to what the general said, particularly with respect to the nuclear waste residue that killed animals, I mean, a lot of this can be checked. And the eyewitnesses that we're hearing here on the air, the people who live in the area, obviously saw roughly the same thing. I don't know. First-time caller line, you're on the air. Hello.
Hi, is this the Art Bell Show?
It is.
Oh, good. I got through.
You did.
I was just listening to the show earlier, and something that struck me about the fireball that they were describing.
Yes, sir.
First, they mentioned the green color.
Right.
It sounds a lot like the La Paz fireballs that Dr. Lincoln La Paz studied back in the late 40s and the 50s.
Yes, sir.
I was just wondering if anybody has done any further research on that. I've read a lot about UFOs, but I've never read any follow-up other than the fact that they were going to set up a tracking station, and then the funding was cut, and then you never hear anything about it ever again as far as anything being figured out as what they were. They were seen mostly over military sites.
All right.
And it sounds a lot like the fireball that he was describing. Almost like,
there's been a string of fireballs reported over Colorado that just won't quit. I mean, just gazillions of them. And California has had them. The Rocketdyne facility near that area, tons of them. We've had them here in southern Nevada.
Oh, my family and I, we saw one last year in northern Nevada.
I just think, and I've said this for a long time, that people should be very cautious before accepting and declaring, well, yes, there it is, another meteor. How the hell do we know it was a meteor?
Well, the interesting thing about the one we saw, it was at night. We were driving into Nevada. We had just crossed the California-Nevada line.
Right.
We saw the meteor. We all said it was a meteor. It went down behind the hills. We assumed it impacted. But within 5 minutes, we saw military jets heading into the area.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I mean, and we live by Beale Air Force here in California. I'm in Yuba City, and I can pick out a military jet even at night. They're just smaller and they move faster.
Methinks we're getting closer to something.
Yeah, they couldn't have, if they had seen that, they were just there too quick, unless they had known it was coming in.
I hear you. I appreciate the call, sir. Thank you. And on my international line, you're on the air. Hello?
It's Ross Dow from the Australian UFO Hotline with some interesting UFO reports.
Well, I hope you got to hear some of what we did earlier.
Not all of it, but I've heard part of it on the Internet.
Okay.
Isn't technology a wonderful thing?
Isn't it amazing? I mean, here you are on the other side of the globe.
Yeah, that's right. We've had some strange reports of, would you believe, atypical flying saucers. Now, our service hasn't received reports like this for over 4 years. At a place in Victoria, which is southeastern parts of Australia, at a place called Tarabungla. It's a national park in a sort of a hilly area.
Yes, sir.
People cited a flying saucer that had a very large dome and 3 sort of round balls underneath it. And about 10 days later, we started getting reports from other parts in the Gippsland area of Victoria, which is about 150 miles away, of the same thing, but with US Air Force markings on them.
Oh, my.
We're wondering whether you might have any comments relating to that, Art.
We deny everything. We deny it all. No, there's no way I could have any comment. I guess I would say I'm not surprised.
Either are we. So we've had some 2 interesting reports there, and we haven't had flying saucer reports for years.
Well, if half of what the general had to say is true, or even a portion thereof, then I wouldn't be surprised that people are seeing them in Australia and every other part of the world that you can imagine.
Yes.
Does that make sense to you?
Well, it could do. It could do.
All right. Well, listen, I appreciate your call.
Thank you.
You take care. That's Australia, and they're seeing objects in their skies with U.S. markings on them. That's the other side of the world. What would we be doing with craft of that sort on the other side of the world? Well, judging from what the general said, it should take, about 2 hours max to get from here to there. So maybe it was just a bit of an outing. What do I know? From the high desert, this is Coast to Coast AM.
You're listening to Art Bell, Somewhere in Time. Tonight featuring a replay of Coast to Coast AM from May 19th, 1998. Listening to Art Bell Somewhere in Time on Premier Radio Networks. Tonight, an encore presentation of Coast to Coast AM from May 19th, 1998.
Well, okay. There's something about the voices here and the harmony that just gets me. I don't know what it is about ABBA, but there's always been something about the harmony that has just really done it for me, if you know what I mean. Wildcard line, you're on the air. Good morning.
Yes, sir. This is Eric calling from Houston, listening to you on KTRH 740 AM.
Well, tell me, Eric, how's everything in Houston?
Things are a bit lighter, but the health warning, they're playing it safe. The health warning is still in effect through the Memorial Day weekend.
Well, what we're getting, I guess, is a shift of basic weather patterns that are taking the smoke elsewhere.
Yeah, the last I heard, and this may be a little dated, is that it seems like West Texas seems to be getting a little bit more of it. But,
yeah. Did you hear the first hour that I did with Whitley Strieber?
Yes, I did.
And with Jaime Maussan?
Yes, sir, I did.
Can you imagine in Mexico spots at 200 degrees centigrade on the ground? Volcanism setting fires?
I don't know what to make of that. I'll just have to wait and see. That's now about the third explanation I've heard about these fires.
Yeah.
We heard it was poor misguided farmers burning their lands.
Yes.
Then I've also heard supposedly drug dealers supposedly starting them to divert Mexican officials. Now this, I kind of wonder, frankly, if there isn't some burning of the rainforest down there, because that is exactly what was happening in Indonesia, and Indonesia was putting out garbage about, it's just El Nino, it's just El Nino, it's just El Nino. So I just wonder. I just wonder.
Well, one thing that I'm beginning to get the sense of, and that is whatever the answer is, we're sure as hell not getting the truth.
Yeah, and that seems to be a recurring theme on this show.
Not only that, but the whole thing, obviously, if you're in Houston, you're hearing a lot about it. But outside of Houston, outside of the areas affected, it's almost a non-story.
Well, yeah, that raises a question about why, and so many things. Remember, the outbreak of the flesh-eating bacteria was studiously ignored by the major media.
I recall.
And such as that. And I don't know. Part of it is, I think, no doubt that there's a bias on the media that if it doesn't happen on the coast, then it really doesn't matter. And I think some of it may be that maybe they just feel that anything that might track back to questions of global warming or such as that is out of the cycle. They don't want to deal with it now. We did Kyoto.
Well, yeah, I think Whitley pointed out that at Kyoto we suggested more or less that all of it's not true and we should do nothing, and so we can't very well come out and admit now what's going on.
Well, yeah, I think there's something to that and such. But so many things, like I think the question of the Streptococcus, they didn't want to deal. And another thing also, and this is another thing that deals with the media's sort of role as there's a big premium placed on not alarming the public needlessly.
I agree.
And, I had to object to Barry Taft a few episodes ago when he says, the media is completely independent. I mean, we just want to entertain people and make money. Mm-hmm. Sands of Iwo Jima made a lot of money. It also was an incredible piece of propaganda. And, the news people, particularly as they've gotten more prosperous and closer to the centers of power, I think they've internalized those values about keeping things nice and even keel and not upsetting the people needlessly. Don't upset the children. Don't let them look behind the curtain.
Well, how do you figure they keep letting me be on the air?
Well, because
I'm curious. I'm kind of curious myself.
Understand. This is the way they view you, and that is your sideshow. You're not regarded as hard news. You're not a responsible journalist.
No,
like Dan Rather.
Don't give me that label.
And such.
No, you're right, and you're absolutely right. I really don't intend to be. I intend to be a forum for the strange, and if you want to put it that way, that's fine. Sideshow, fine.
It's not how I put it. It's the way I think that is what kind of inoculates you.
Believe me, caller, I've considered this many times. That is to say, why I am allowed to have this kind of information on the air. Now, the general said something that was, I thought, revealing. He said, 14 years ago, if you'd done this kind of show, what do you think would have happened? And the answer is obvious. I would have been off the air before you could have said flying disc.
Yeah. Well, now we get into the real meat of, I guess, what I wanted to call and, my thoughts about General A and such. And the other thing, and you know it as well as anyone, is that, this is an open forum. If any disinformation wants to get in, somebody just calls up. You've had callers before. I don't know. Maybe you think I'm one of them who are disinformationists.
I'm sure of it.
And such. So I think the powers that be would rather not have you talking about HAARP. I'm very sure. I'm sure they'd rather you not even talk about blasting dolphins. But on the other hand, if they want to put something out, and particularly something that they can be sure is not going to be picked up by the national media because they've got their noses somewhere else. We won't dwell on that. It's useful. It's useful, and I have to say I've grown very wary after reading as much Jacques Vallée and John Keel as I have recently. I'm very wary of hearing another person from military or intelligence background, particularly one who doesn't want to reveal their identity, and saying very little and suggesting very much and, hinting or promising, something's just going to happen just around the corner. Linda Moulton Howe has had dealings with these characters, Richard Doty, who for some reason she still quotes as a source. I don't know why. But he's worked her, and she knew it. She knows it at the time, that HBO special that got torpedoed,
sure,
and such. And I'm just very wary, and I have to think when Vallée says that it's interesting how a lot of energy is being placed on trying to badger the government into releasing something that. Either it doesn't have, and if it doesn't have it, it doesn't have it. If it does have it, it doesn't want to let loose, and is diverting a lot of energy from a lot of independent field research.
Well, Well said, sir. I can't deny that any of it might be so. I have no way of knowing. I'm just glad the forum continues to be here.
I understand. And so the best thing to say, and this is the thing why I like an open forum like Art Bell, I like the Internet, and getting back to the media, you know, every so often when Nightline has something, when it's Slow News Day, Nightline picks on the latest idiotic thing on the Internet, and then they get down to what they really like to talk about, and that is, gee, we need a gatekeeper.
Yep.
The Internet needs a gatekeeper. I say to hell with the gatekeepers. I will take Art Bell and Matt Drudge any day over Ted Koppel and Tim Russert and Jim Lehrer and the rest of them, and Cokie Roberts deciding what is newsworthy and what isn't.
I could not agree more. Thank you so very much. And even though I think that Larry Hunter and Boris Said are wrong with regard to Dr. Hawass, I would defend until the end of time their right to make postings on the Internet. And you may notice that as contentious as the statement by Graham Hancock and John Anthony West is, it defends their right to be posting on the Internet. So please do not take any of this internal, if you will, argument that's going on as a license to suggest that there ought to be a gatekeeper on the Internet, because I'm sure as hell not suggesting that. Now, I've got somebody coming on that I think you should listen to, and then I've got more information that I've simply got to get out. But here, in fact, is another witness. Hello there. You may, if you wish, tell us your name.
Yeah, my name's Ed.
Ed? Okay, Ed. You sent me a fax, and I
was going to quote the fax, basically.
Okay, and I called you. So stay good and close to the phone. You'll have to kind of yell at us. You're not too strong.
Okay.
That's much better. And would you please tell us what you know? It has to do, again, with the Rocketdyne business.
Yeah, I've been living in Chatsworth between the Simi and and Rocketdyne since 1982. And during that time, I've witnessed seeing an orb-shaped object streaming over to head towards Rocketdyne near Woolsey Canyon. I've seen this twice, and they seem to be bright, round, and disappear or just stop as they approach Rocketdyne. They didn't burn out, and they didn't crash. And the first one was about 10 years ago, and the last one was last summer, and they seem to occur in the early evening, like between 8:30 and 10 p.m., basically.
So you've seen these things?
Yeah.
Are they kind of as described?
I don't know how they've been described. I wasn't listening to the show. I kind of woke up in the middle of it.
Well, they described
But they were
them...
round orbs, and they were bright.
Yes.
And they were colorful, kind of like a halogen light is colorful.
Right.
You know, like bluish and stuff like that.
Right.
Bluish to white.
And they just seemed to virtually disappear?
Yeah, and they were silent. There wasn't any noise involved.
Silent?
No sound. And they were real close overhead. And when I sit on my house, I look out over the hill that looks over Woolsey Canyon, and the last one I saw was on the deck, and it basically was at eye level from me going in.
I mean, what do you think when you see this?
I don't know. I mean, and they're so quiet, and then I hear nothing, no reaction about them or anything about them afterwards.
Well, we sure got a story tonight.
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of it.
So you buy it?
Oh, yeah, and I just want to hear more, and I want to hear more people's,
All right, well, look,
because the more that comes out...
Obviously. I appreciate your input, sir.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ed. Take care. So there's another person. I mean, we're talking to people right there. East of the Rockies, you're on the air.
Good morning, Art.
Good morning.
First of all, has the locust reached you yet? You haven't seen anything about them lately?
I haven't seen them yet. Let's not encourage them.
Well, we got them here in Georgia.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I went to South Carolina over the weekend, stopped at the rest area right at the borderline.
Yes, sir.
And it sounded like something out of an Alfred Hitchcock movie. They were so loud.
Well, I hope they don't make it. They're about 90 miles south.
Yeah. The people in some of the towns here in Georgia say they can't even sleep at night. It's so bad.
Well, this is one weird damn year.
Yeah, it is.
I'm not kidding. This is really a weird year. And you know what? I don't think it's going to get any better.
No, it doesn't seem like it, does it?
No, sir. I appreciate the call. I think what is happening is what I dubbed, what I called, for lack of a better phrase, the quickening. It's honest. It's honest. I don't know what else to say. West of the Rockies, you're on the air.
Hi, this is Kathy in Idaho.
Hello, Kathy.
Was it last week or a couple weeks ago you had Mr. Dale on, and he was
Stan?
talking about the hot spots.
I know.
And he said Central America was one of the hot spots, or could be.
You might also want to recall that Sean David Morton predicted volcanic activity in Mexico would begin to peak this spring. Well,
Yeah.
guess what?
Here it is.
Yeah, here it is.
Okay, I just wanted to reaffirm that, make sure I was right in remembering.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Also, let me read this to you from São Paulo, Brazil. An underground fire is smoldering and spreading underfoot in southeastern Brazil, and local firefighters are stumped over how to deal with it. Said Sergeant David Francisco de Silva, it's complicated. He said, quote, we're talking about a subterranean fire, so you can saturate the land, but there's not much else you can do. It is causing headaches. It's causing nausea. Temperatures 4 inches below the ash-covered surface are reaching 140 degrees Fahrenheit. West of the Rockies, you're on the air.
Yeah, hi, Art.
Hello.
Say, your programs keep getting so much better all the time.
Well, better may translate to weirder, but there's weird all around us.
Well, it's better than the what you've described as a cookie-cutter programming, the irrelevancy, the lies and deceit coming out of the media these days, that's been coming out for years.
I know.
And something the general said, he said, basically he said the future is now, but he said your program brings out, has people interested again. They're not sick and tired of the same old mediocrity. And that speaks for me. One of the reasons I think that you're allowed to stay on the air with people disinforming the public. In other words, for anything you have to say, there's about 100 out there who will shout you down as being...
I know.
And to show just how far that goes, something I came across today, actually I was laughing at it. I hope you won't take it wrong. But this is a reflection of the mentality, say, the two editorial cartoons that Benson did. They've got their Bensons out there, so they're not worried.
I know. Well, we're retaliating. Have you seen all the cute Benson cartoons?
Oh, I haven't had a chance to, but I was so tickled when you decided to do that. And
we've got about 30 of them now. We've got some very talented people out there. Benson better watch out.
Well, I hope everybody, I hope all of that just kind of goes to show that Steve Benson isn't all as great as he thinks he is, and that he's not the only one capable of being Benson, or of doing what he does.
Of Bensonizing people?
Pardon?
Of Bensonizing people?
That could be, but it's still effective. And can I read you something real quick?
Sure.
Okay, this I came across today. This is what I was laughing about, but it just goes to show they've labeled you with a stigma. Now, this is something you should, I think, considering where it's coming from, you should wear it like a badge of honor.
What's it from?
This is from the Science Fiction Book Club. It's about a novel that came out. I'll just read it real quick. It's just a couple of sentences.
Okay, go.
It says, all the bugs are dead, and we're next. Dust, a novel. When a host of plague organisms, flesh-eating mites, crop-rotting fungi, and poisonous red tides erupt all over the globe, the result is devastation and chaos. As a talk radio madman fans the flames of violence, it's up to a small group of researchers to find a solution before the world crumbles to dust.
No kidding.
This is Dust, a novel by Charles Pellegrino, if I may say
Do
that.
me a favor, will you, and fax that to me or send it to me somehow?
It'll be snail mail, but yes,
right.
that's it'd be a pleasure. I'll leave you with that. Thank you, Art.
Thank you, my friend, and take care. Yeah, I'm used to it. West of the Rockies, you're on the air.
Hey.
Hey.
How you doing, Art?
I'm doing.
Hey, this is Daryl here in Sacramento, listening to 650 AM.
KSTE.
You got it. I don't know, maybe I'm a small maybe I'm part of that small percentage of people who, I'm ready for the technology, I'm not afraid of it. Or maybe the percentage is a lot larger that's ready to hear it, in regards to the comments the General made.
Maybe it depends on what would be said. I mean, are you a religious person?
Well, yeah, I am, but...
Are you? Do you believe in God?
Well, sure.
Do you?
Yeah, I'm
strongly believe in God and believe that when you die you will go from here to there, that there is an afterlife, that you don't just wink out?
Absolutely.
Suppose you were to find out tomorrow that all of that's not true. Would that bother you?
My faith is stronger than that, but I still think...
Well, suppose I had irrefutable evidence that there is no God as you believe there to be a God, and that you will not live at all after you die. Would that bother you?
Well, sure, it would bother me.
Okay.
Absolutely, but...
All right. Well, all right. Then I rest my case. And also my show is over, so I've got to go. But I'm going to give you the honors.
Well, good night, America.
That's the way it works, all right.
It's a wonderful day.
Canada, South America, the Caribbean, all of you out there, thank you, and we will continue with all of this tomorrow. Good night.